Did you know that the Gardener's Workshop offers online courses? Whether you're a gardener or a flower farmer, we cover it all, allowing you to increase your skills at your own pace. So check out our full list of courses today at thegardenersworkshop.com. The Gardener's Workshop, turning all thumbs green.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend in flowers, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I'm super glad you either dropped in here on my YouTube channel where there's a video going, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast app. I'm just glad you're here. So friends, if you're new here or you haven't been around with us for very long, just a little rundown. So I started my little city flower farm back in 1998, hit the ground running. I was basically a novice gardener and found my way. And here we are 26 years later with a city flower farm that went on to produce for 23 florists, 2 supermarket chains, 2 retail programs being a bouquet drop-off service and an on-farm private subscriptions, as well as we did farmers markets. So we have grown a lot of flowers. When we closed down our big high production area of the farm, we were producing close to 250,000 stems per year from my little city outdoor flower farm, y'all. No hoop and greenhouses. So that's kind of where we're coming from. And I say that because I want people to know that when you hear me giving instructions or tips and recommendations, it's based on growing outside in a garden, and you can apply it to wherever you live too. So this podcast is made possible by thegardenersworkshop.com, which is home base for us for everything cut flowers. You'll find all the resources over there, our blogs, our podcasts, our fully stocked online garden shop, as well as our online course library that you can check out. All right, friends. So I'm ready to jump into today's topic, which, cool flowers are near and dear to my heart. They launched me into flower farming and is what set me apart for all these years from all the other growers. And it can do the very same for you. So today's podcast is the top 5 mistakes I see made with cool flowers. These are the things that I get asked literally just about every day through many different avenues over and over again. It's been going on for 10 years and it's going to keep on going. And I totally understand. Do you want to know why we make so many mistakes? That's why cool flowers kind of fell out of fashion all those years, decades ago, is because of their awkward planting time. That's what it really all is kind of like stemmed from, right? Because of this awkward planting time, we just have a hard time wrapping our heads around all the rest of the story. And so I'm just going to do a run through what these top 5 mistakes are and ways that I either, try to remember them or just basic tips on. So number 1 is not knowing your first and last historic frost dates, and to know either your USDA winter hardiness zone, but if you're international, knowing what your historic lowest winter temperature is. And then friends, here's the easy fix. If you're international, which we know we have a ton of international listeners, you just look at the USDA winter hardiness zone. It has it right. There's a key over on the right-hand side. Look up and find which one of the zones your temperature falls in. And then you can just know that that's your zone for all, because everybody uses that here in the States anyway, most often. Y'all, this is key information. It's really understandable now to me why people just don't understand why that's like the starting point. That's the beginning of the story. That's the opener. That's the information that you need to know, because so often somebody will write in and say, my XYZ was planted at XY time and it either died or it struggled, or you know what I mean, with whatever their struggle is. And, on social media, classic on Ask a Flower Farmer, when I host that every week, I'm not there every week, but on the weeks that I host it, somebody will ask me that. And my very first question is when's your first fall frost? And they don't know. Or they know, but they didn't connect the dots that's what keys when you actually fall plant. So knowing and here's the key, historic first fall frost and last spring frost and your lowest winter temperature, and then how that relates to the USDA winter hardiness zone if you're using that. So here's the thing I want to point out. The reason I use the word historic is, friends, I know weather's changing. We all know weather's changing. It's, if nothing else, it's just basically unreliable, right? You know, you just don't know what to expect anymore. And it's not that we didn't get curveballs 3 decades ago, but they were not as frequent and they were not as severe, it seemed to me. So historic means this is information that you would look up online, because I would put into a search engine, when is my, first historic fall frost at this zip code, and put in your zip code. And that information is based on usually a decade or more of information, not just the last 2 years, not just last year. And I find that people do that all the time because they just don't, we're not, again, I just want to say, don't feel like you're doing everything wrong. I did everything wrong. A lot of people do everything wrong. And it's because this is so different than warm to hot growing. So search engine, that question, what is my first and last historic frost dates for my area? And find out what your lowest winter temperature is. Because friends, the rest of the cool flower story grows from there. And when you have that wrong, it just goes wrong the rest of the way. And that is probably, I would say, the number one mistake that folks make that I hear over and over again. All right. Mistake number 2, and this is another really good one, is not preparing beds ahead of time. Because here's the thing, fall planting and very early spring planting typically happen when temperatures are either cooling off in fall, hopefully, or it's cold outside in very early spring. Sometimes it's frozen, sometimes we have snow. If you did not think ahead and prepare your planting areas, when it's the proper time for you to plant, you're not going to be able to plant. And that is another key one, back, especially when I was doing big conferences when there was live audiences, and I would talk about very early spring plantings. And, I was the kind of speaker, y'all, that I would say at the beginning of my class or the talk that I don't mind people raising their hands during the talk to ask the question, why it's relative to what we're talking about. And when I would get to the very early spring planting window of planting cool flowers, which is when everybody can typically plant cool flowers, no matter where you are, hands would shoot up, particularly when it's experienced gardeners, because they're kind of in tune, right? They would raise their hands and say, oh my gosh. For me, for an example, so my very early spring planting window is like mid-February to the 1st of March. It's still cold here. We often have snow. We're often still having ice storms, and it's just wind whipping and cold outside. People's hands go up to say, oh my gosh, I can't prepare beds. My ground is frozen. My ground's too wet, or I have snow, or yada, yada, yada. And those are all true. That's why you have to prepare ahead. Y'all, how do you think we have bikinis in stores to go on cruises in January? Is because that was thought about long before January came around, right? Well, we have to do that. I mean, you should always be doing that if you're a flower farmer. But when you're addressing cool season hardy annuals, you really have to plan ahead. Everybody prepares their beds in early fall. So you're ready for your fall planting as well as that very early spring planting. Because here's the other one, the one place that I try not to exercise wiggle room on dates is when I'm direct sowing. I really try to stick to my windows, to the cool flower concept. And if the beds aren't prepared, that's the number one thing that holds you back. And so let me give you a little tip on how you can prepare early, if you want, and hold those beds until it's time. So for us, particularly with direct sowing beds, we don't use any biodegradable film on those beds like we do for transplants. It's open soil. So obviously, if you prepared that in advance, they're just going to instantly start growing, summer weeds right alongside probably some cool season weeds as they start. So you can prepare your bed and then immediately, right after you finish preparing it, cover that bed with a silage tarp. And that does so much. First off, if it's still hot outside, it's going to extinguish any weed seeds that are on the surface. Bonus, right? And it also blocks any rain from getting to that soil. So it's not going to encourage any weed seeds. Then on the day that it's time for you to direct sow, you just go out there and take the silage tarp off and plant your seeds, y'all. Planning ahead. And I mean, I could just go so wide and deep. And this is why it is so important to know where you're going to be fall planting and preparing for cool flowers. So you don't plant flowers in that area that are still producing late in the summer. I could go on and on, friends, but I'm not. So not preparing their planting areas ahead is a common mistake and just an upset, and just turns the whole, bucket upside down when you're trying so hard to nail your planting time, which we know is where it all starts. The success or the failures start with when you get your stuff in the ground. All right. Top mistake number 3. Oh my gosh. Not knowing how a seed prefers to be started. Did you know that it has absolutely nothing to do with what you want to do? Every seed has its preferred method of starting, and it's not really the preferred method as much as it is preferred conditions. And there are easiest ways to produce those conditions for those plants. So for instance, seeds like snapdragons, they're tiny little seeds and they have their own set of conditions that they prefer. And those conditions are like almost nearly impossible to provide outside in the garden. There are surely people that can direct sow snaps and have success, but that is the exception instead of the rule. So knowing how it's easiest to start the particular seed of the flowers that you want to start is the next step to Easyville, y'all. I mean, if you do the opposite, which we see that every single day, it is so hard and oftentimes ends in failure. And this is true with all seeds, not just cool flowers, but those cool flower seeds that prefer to be started indoors, you need to know who those are. And then those seeds that prefer to be direct sown outside. And, I think of instantly with direct sowing, I think of poppies, Iceland poppies, which is just such a coveted flower, right? And bells of Ireland, and larkspur. Those 3 are my go-to definite direct sow out in the garden. And why is it? They each have their own little reasons why they do better outside in fall conditions, y'all, because you know what that means? They are very temperature focused. It is really hard to produce cool temperatures indoors that these guys really like. It's easy to do these seeds, to get them up and going when you plant them in their preferred method to get the best and easiest success. Then the rest of the story just falls in. I mean, isn't it that often the way it is when you start off 10 steps behind everybody else, you never feel like you get ahead. That's what happens when you don't start in the preferred method. Then you have a failure. Then you feel like it's too late. And then, right? So this information is readily available on all of our resources, y'all, on our website, on our store, on the seeds, in the books, in the courses. It's everywhere. You just have to realize you need to know it for each individual seed. All right. So what is mistake number 4? And this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. It's not knowing what you need to give the seed to actually get it to germinate and then to grow the transplant up before it gets out to the garden. And this comes down to the conditions. As I mentioned with those direct seeded ones, I have definitely seen, if I have a year that we are just having hot weather go on and on and on in fall, much later than normal, I would delay my direct sowing. That's the only time it happens, because I know when it's hot outside, these seeds are not going to germinate. They're just going to sit there. But you can believe the weed seeds are going to sprout and grow. And then you're going to have to do more maintenance to keep them in check, waiting on your seeds. So you've got to really focus in on what those direct seeded needs. And then on the transplants, which is the lion's share of how I start all of my seeds, what conditions do you need to actually give them? So a really common question I get is, Do cool season hardy annuals need to be put on a seedling heat mat? And they do. They want their soil not hot like warm season stuff. They want their soil warm, but they want cool air temperatures. So I keep my grow room at about 65 to 70 degrees when I am growing cool season hardy annuals versus 85 plus when it's warm season stuff. Big difference, y'all. But my seedlings go onto that seedling heat mat with a cookie cooling rack underneath them to just generate a little bit of air space between the hot mat and the bottom of my trays. It still produces 24/7 warmth, but they aren't getting overcooked. And then grow lights, y'all. You know, the seedlings, the healthiest seedlings grow with 16 to 18 hours of bright, intense light a day. That's how you grow short, stocky, healthy transplants. We know healthy transplants go on to produce better with less disease and pest issues. They're just healthier. It's just one more piece of the pie. Yes, grow lights are essential. And 16 to 18 hours of daylight a day is not even possible in a greenhouse, y'all. There's not that much daylight. So grow lights are essential. And then, of course, feeding them once a week and watering, getting your watering habits down, that you're not keeping your soil moist 24/7, that your environment is set up, that every morning when you go into water, your soil is dry. So that means that all night long, your transplants have been getting oxygen to their soil, to their roots, right? And then you're going to water them, and then they get all the water, all the drinking they need, and they drink it all up, and they're dry overnight and get oxygen. Do you see how important all of these steps are? And then, friends, number 5, and I say this one, this is not really a mistake. I think people, they feel like a loser if they choose to do this, but I'm telling you, you are a smart farmer when you do this. And that is, you do not have to start all the seeds yourself. One of the things that we see, and especially if you're growing in a greenhouse, it is way too hot in there at the proper time to start cool flowers most often. And so considering purchasing plugs is a very economical way to have your transplants ready on time. And I mean, we have plug suppliers now, like Farmer Bailey plugs that supply a less of a minimum. You still have to buy 3 trays, but you can get trays with larger plants and less numbers. Buying plugs through plant brokers is really simple and not intimidating. You know, Hort, our good friend Dave Dowling, is the cut flower sales rep specialist there. You can reach out to him and he can help guide you and supply you with the lists. You know, consider not starting. And of course, we all pretty much purchase Lysianthus plugs. I also purchased Campanula, Trachelium, and that's pretty much, those are just long growers, kind of hard to start perhaps, and it's just a smart move. It's financially the best choice to make to have a great stand of plants. So friends, you can find those plant brokers typically by searching that, do that online, finding, you know, small quantity plant brokers or reaching out in the cut flower world, you know. And so, friends, I hope this has helped you, because we are at that time, right? And just remind you that over at thegardenersworkshop.com, on our online garden shop, we have a whole category of cool season seeds. That's everything that I'm starting. Those are all the cool flowers that I grow. It has all the pertinent information on every single seed page, y'all. You have to just go over there and look. Of course, there's the Cool Flower book. There's the Cool Flower Seed to Harvest course that is amazing, that shows you everything, field demonstration, starting from seed, harvesting, where you make the cut, harvesting stage, and so much more. You'll find that all over at thegardenersworkshop.com, just to bring all the pieces together for you and to show you the way, because we are all about helping you grow great cool flowers, friends. So till we meet again, friends, ciao.